Hey, everybody, I'm Sam from Manifest, and this interview series is called I Broke My Leg, and I'm stuck in this chair. And we thought this would be a cool opportunity to meet some fun people in the industry and just have cool conversations. And, I might be stuck here for a few months, so this could turn into a really long series. I'm here today with Ash Malloy. Ash has spent a decade working in brand marketing and sponsorship. He's been at the helm of so many brands, Ash. LG, you're overseeing consumer and brand marketing. You launched direct-to-consumer brands in this era of viral and social content. You're kind of the man, is the impression that we all get. So today, bringing it up to speed, you are the co-founder of Counterculture World. And what's your goal? What do you do there? What does Counterculture do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was actually going to say, how did we meet, Sam? I think some people might be interested to find out, how our worlds collided. Um, in terms of Counterculture World, obviously, not only do we work with you and Manifest and all the things that you guys have going on, but at its core, Counterculture World is an agency that helps ghostwrite strategies for brands, and we work with content creators and influencers. We work with a whole bunch of different brands, small ones, big ones, medium-sized ones. And really our goal is just to help them tell better stories.
Which is why we're here today, telling some stories together.
Exactly.
So yeah, we met a few months ago under a couple of different auspices. I think KJ, one of your co-founders and colleagues, is looking for some packaging, and here comes Manifest. And we were, really at a place in our life as an agency, an accelerator, kind of an investor in brands and in their futures, looking for ways to tell our story. So it was a really fun conversation when we met, because it was sort of like, how can we all help each other? There's lots of different ways that this could go. So this is one of the ways it's going, is like, let's tell each other's stories to the internet.
Exactly. And I think it's so important to have agencies and partners on the path to success or on the path to entrepreneurship. And it was really great to meet your team and see how many things you guys are doing and how many things we're doing. And, but by some virtue, a lot of those things weren't crossed over. So it just made sense for us to talk and work together and build relationships. And, now we're having a series, prefaced by your broken leg and your ski accident. Exactly.
Which will remain off camera mysteriously.
Yes, exactly. That'll be a part 2.
Yeah. We'll go in for the macro shot.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about the services and the solutions that you guys offer. I know that there's a strategic and truly service-like component of it. I mean, you and I spend a ton of time talking, and our crews spend a lot of time talking to each other and kind of like developing strategy. But you have digital solutions too. Talk us through what some of those are, and specifically sort of, in the realm of consumer goods, consumer packaged goods, and the types of brands that you and I generally tend to be really interested in helping.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting industry to be in specifically. And when I say industry, I'm really talking about the throngs and throngs of people that have gravitated towards direct to consumer brands because they've seen all of these stories and all of these successes over the last, I would say, decade from brands that came, really, it feels like out of nowhere to hit these massive valuations. The reality is, I think in a lot of those instances, those brands weren't overnight successes. They were brands that were a long time in the making, as you would know. And, I have some questions for you later on to kind of dive into that, because I think what's really interesting is that the presumption is that these brands came out of nowhere and they saw a ton of success and they have these massive valuations, and a lot of people are attracted towards replicating that. I think we know that that's not the case. I think we know that with every brand, with every successful opportunity, there's a whole throng of people and ideas. There's a bunch of successes and a bunch of failures that lead them to that place. As an agency at Counterculture World, and what I try to do from a thought leadership perspective is really focus on helping brands build fundamental foundations from a digital perspective, from a community perspective, so that they can grow in a strategic, in a smart way. Gone are the days of throwing a little bit of money at Meta or
A lot
Google
of
and
money.
seeing significant return, a lot of money, exactly. And now people are looking at what are those foundations of support? What are those foundations of community growth? And that's really where we come in terms of an agency partner. But where I see the opportunity for the future generation of brands, and if anyone's listening to this conversation and they're considering launching a direct to consumer brand, I think a lot of people are hesitant to jump in now. I think
Yeah.
it's still a great time to jump in. I think there's a lot of disruption that can be had across a whole bunch of different industries. You just have to do it the right way and find the right people to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the current environment is just kind of depressed. I mean, it's quiet out there, but I always view that as the most fertile. Well, fertile is probably the wrong word because it's not. It's the winter before the spring. But that's like to badger the metaphor. That's when the seeds get planted. And I think the other thing to keep in mind tactically for brands that are looking to edge in this moment or considering whether or not they should just wait is that there's a lot of stuff that's on sale. Yeah, everybody needs business right now. Start at the bottom and then grow. And I think, I don't know if this is rock bottom, but certainly feels somewhere in the neighborhood. So, I've been encouraging brands to start their next product plan right now, or for a founder that's looking, should I just wait? It's like, well, no, make all your plans now. And then when things start to lift, like the tide will lift everything. And we've seen that be true over and over again. Although I think in my short lifetime, as a founder and as a kind of participant in this marketplace, this is the worst that it's been from, in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I
That's
share that
exciting.
sentiment. Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
great.
and I think if anything, a lot of the brands that, maybe took on investment too soon or focused on growth, over profit, or, all of those types of new, vanity metrics, if you will, are finding now that, it's a much more challenging place to be. And with that leaves an opportunity for further disruption, even in those segments where someone might have already come in and established themselves. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when things are tough, the tough get going, as they say. I don't know
Yeah.
how many cliched
The
terms
tough
that
get
we can
rocking.
use here during this. Yeah, exactly. During this
We
18
can
minutes that
try.
we have, but yeah, exactly.
I want to talk about personalization and content.
Yes.
Particularly on mobile, on social. You have so much experience on those channels. What do you view as the best for direct to consumer brands?
Yeah, I think this is probably the toughest nut to crack when it comes to direct to consumer brands. I literally just spoke to a brand that's doing really well in the CPG space, and their question to me was, is it worth it to invest in organic social?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that's worth it? Because oftentimes organic social and the idea of creating custom content for your audiences is the heaviest lifting. As part of the reason why we connected was around that challenge of, we know what we want to do, but how do we get it off the ground?
Yeah.
That being said, I don't think there's ever been a more important time than building and creating content that's specific to your audience versus trying to pick up a strategy off the shelf. I don't think any two brands are the same. I think consumers are at a place where they've been bombarded by the Meta ads and the Twitter ads and the YouTube ads and the retargeting and the remarketing and the email flows and all of those things for so long now that they can pick up on those things very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that the way that you break through the noise is by really focusing in on, of course, understanding your audience, but adding value to what they have above and beyond what you're offering them.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're bringing them value in their lives completely independently from the product that you're selling.
Yeah.
They see your product, believe me, they know what you have to offer. It's no
We get
longer
it.
like you don't need a for sale sign on your lawn for people to know that it's for sale. And I think that's where customization becomes key, is when there's a lot of noise in the market, when there's a lot of brands trying to do the same thing, the more targeted you can get, the more authentic you can be with the way you communicate to your audience, the more it's going to resonate with them.
So if you could boil it down to like three, we'll just take three because it's a nice round number.
Yeah.
Pick three pillars that you think, for a brand that is looking to break through that noise right now. What are the three things they need to be doing today to lay the foundation for the next step?
I would say number one is thought leadership. You have to show your consumers why they should care about what you're doing. Certainly in any market that you're in, unless you are really lucky and you have a patent and a copyright for something that no one else can replicate, there's other competitors out there. There's other products that are similar to yours. So thought leadership is number one. Number two, I think authenticity is a really key part of it. By authenticity, I don't just mean don't lie. I think that goes without saying, but I think it's like showing the real side of entrepreneurship, showing that you're sitting there across
Showing
from
your
me
broken leg.
with a broken leg after you had that accident, and now you're pivoting to say, well, I can't go into the office anymore, I can't go to the warehouse anymore, I can't necessarily take phone calls. So what does authenticity look like in this case? It's sitting down and connecting with people like me and others in your network who might have value to bring in. So I would say it's thought leadership, it's authenticity, and then the third one is, it's rather a broad one, but I think just engaging content.
Yeah.
I think it's just like, no one wants to see your product packaging on your Instagram and on your TikTok for the 50th time or the 100th time. It's about like, how do you add that additional value? And it ties really nicely into authenticity. It's like those behind the scenes tidbits. Like, what's it like when you go to the warehouse and a skid shows up that you weren't prepared for, and now you have to unload them to get them to your Black Friday sale? People really like that type of nuance. And if I look at brands that like have been authentic and have broken that third wall, it's like traditional movies, and then there was The Office that broke the third wall and people really loved it because they felt part of it. It's like breaking the third wall in the DTC space as well, as not being so stuffy and concerned. It's just about looking your customers in the eyes and telling them what it's like to run a brand.
Well, and I think there's an interesting nugget in what you just said, because I almost feel like what you're saying is that consumers or potential consumers or your audience or whatever, however you want to characterize it, they want you to engage with your product too. It's not just about begging them to engage with your product. And the product of your business, of your brand, isn't just a physical widget or good that you're selling. It's the team, it's the story, it's your journey, it's all of the art, it's the trash too, like the things that go into it that never really see the light of day. It's a sketch that doesn't become anything, but that may be other than a jumping off point for the next thing or the next idea.
For sure.
Digital trash.
Yes, exactly.
Your real trash. So, and that worked really well for us at Gear, and it's working even better at Manifest because we have so many dynamic kind of characteristics of this insanely large business and kind of ambition that we have to build a brand that helps other brands. And there's just a lot of movement in that. And I think that customers want to see that. I think it's really interesting. And I think it takes away some of the varnish and the polish and replaces it with authenticity. And that can turn into thought leadership, because you're like, not everything's perfect. Our point of view is it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a process. Here's the process. Look at it. Isn't that insane?
For sure. And I think so many like traditional brands would have focused on like the vanity of, here's our perfectly designed package that's sitting on this perfectly designed shelf with this perfectly designed image. And the reality is, we know, like, sometimes you get packages and the bottles look messed up. Sometimes you get a skid and half of it is broken. Sometimes the ingredients aren't the right ones. The idea of like BTS, like the hashtag of behind the scenes, isn't new. Human psychology we've always enjoyed that. That's why movies used to have, 2 hours of behind the scene on VHS. We might be dating ourselves a little bit here, but every movie had that because people want to know the inner, like they want to know what it was like behind the scenes in the trailers, doing the stunts. And the same equation or the same model can be applied to DTC brands. People just want to know what it's like to run a business, and they'll support a business that they see, those challenges in, and they don't just see that like perfection, the crystal veneer that's over top of everything.
Yeah. And honestly, it's so much more fun that way. Like the stuff that we do to get things into the world, whether it's a message or a product or, a story, It's so interesting. You're right. Like
Mhm.
let's pull out the VHS tapes and dust them off. Like,
For
it
sure.
was the most
Exactly.
interesting part of every movie was like,
Yeah.
and also the longest part of every movie.
Yes, exactly. Well, and it's serendipitous because the hardest part of running a business isn't the perfectly packaged design. It's all the behind the scenes stuff that you have to
Right.
deal with to get to that point. So why not
Yeah.
share it?
How much do you view this moment in time, this slice in time, as different from like the 10 years that preceded it? Or you can skip a few years if you want, go back to
Yeah,
2015.
yeah. No, look, I think when I look at today's moment in time compared to what brands would have had to do 10 years ago, I think brands are being challenged more to be their authentic, unfiltered selves. And the brands that are willing to step up and show their vulnerability or their rough edges are the ones that are have the most heavily rewarded for that authenticity by their audiences. I just think that, regardless of the generation, people have been inundated with ads. If you're older, 50, 60, 70 years, what I would consider the age of modern advertising. And if you're the younger generation, then you're, for lack of a better word, maybe they can bleep this out, but your bullshit meter is really well honed on social media
Finely
now,
tuned.
right? Like very, very finely tuned. So I think that's the biggest thing is it's an opportunity for marketers. It's an opportunity for brands who are willing to embrace that, change and that authenticity. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing that these larger CPG conglomerates, they're not able to replicate it themselves. They have to go out and buy those brands, the smaller up and coming DTC brands who've built their community the right way because,
Right.
you know, if you're the Procter and Gambles or the Johnson and Johnsons of the world, it's a lot harder to be authentic and true to your audience when you're, a multi-billion-dollar industry that doesn't make any decisions without, hundreds of thousands of dollars of market research.
Right, right. Well, and in their defense, that their legacy brands, they've been around for a while for a reason. The model
Yeah,
worked, right? Like that, they're
yeah.
billion-dollar businesses, and it worked. And I think,
Hmm.
I really kind of feel for them in a way because there's a lot of new tech that has become relevant in getting this content either created or propagated. There are a lot of new kind of things that work that are, it's like the Wild West in a way, or
Yeah,
whatever came like right after. It's the gold rush. Um, so, like for a huge brand, for a legacy property like that to pivot so quickly, like of course it's hard. Like the thing that built them into the successful behemoths that they are is kind of changing at a
yeah.
speed we've never seen change before. So um I want to see those brands win in this environment because if you think about how many stories a tiny little brand new brand has to tell, think about how many stories they have to tell. Like I want to see that behind the scenes movie. I think it'd be
For sure,
fascinating.
for
Um,
sure, for
you
sure.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
So this makes me reflect on kind of my life at Gear, and for anyone who hasn't heard the Gear story on any of our other channels, for about 10 years I ran a consumer goods business called Get It Right, and we made kitchenwares, and it was all the things of the direct to consumer era. It was small and scrappy, and then it was big, and then it was acquired, and it was really kind of a dream come true, but 10 years in the making. And I remember near the beginning, and Instagram was kind of like becoming a thing. So I'm dating myself again.
Mhm.
And I remember just sort of reflecting on how much more we had to do as a brand to be relevant. Like, I think what I got into it expecting was that I would sort of like make a product, and then, you put like I don't know, your company name on like the office wall, and then you're a business, and people know where to find you. And I don't know what I was thinking, but certainly it was more simple than what the reality became, because the burden of content creation was really tangible. Like, oh my gosh, to tell our story, you mean we have to have photos to a standard, and videos to a standard, and written content to a standard, and SEO to a standard, and so on. And so, a website, like,
Yeah.
70 years ago, 50 years ago, you didn't have to have a website to be a relevant consumer goods brand. So what I love about agencies like countercultural world is that you guys recognize that burden and you're here to help. And that's like one of, it really aligns with our cultural values, maybe it's
For sure.
countercultural values. We're here to help. And that has been like, what one of my colleagues asked me, like, well, what is our culture? I'm like, well, it's, it's whatever we're doing every day, really, but I'll try to like I'll try to put it down in words. And that's for another conversation, but I squeezed out the first one, which is we're here to help. And you guys are here to help. And I think that brands really need it. This is not simple and it's not straightforward and it's not, it's not your mom's brand. I mean, I love moms. I am a mom, but it is just a really complicated thing to go from zero to success, and can't underestimate it. And I think 100%. Having folks like you around to help people level with that, make peace with it, and then start to be productive within that environment is really important.
For sure. Yeah, no, I agree with your sentiment. And obviously, I share that wholeheartedly when it comes to the stuff that we do and the stuff that you do. On that note, I have some questions for you. I'm curious. I think,
Let's do it.
I would say the first thing that I think people are probably curious about looking back, as it relates to being a founder, what's one advice that you would give your younger self? If you had to go back to like the day one where you decided to launch your business, what's like one advice that you would have given yourself?
Oh my gosh, there's so many little pieces. I'll pick one. I think I would have educated myself financially a little earlier. I think I went in as a creative, a technical creative, as a product person, and I felt really confident about the product that I was making. And I spent a lot of time learning about product. Like I called rocket scientists to learn about silicone. No joke. I stalked this guy and I got his phone number. He lives in San Diego. And I deep dived into product knowledge because I viewed that as the area that I needed to be a specialist in. And I think I missed for a moment how important it was to be financially literate within, and I don't have an MBA. I mean, I'm just a product person. So I'm not advocating necessarily the MBA path, but I am advocating financial literacy because it would have helped us grow so much faster and so much more safely. A lot of our, our family money, my whatever I had saved, whatever Brian was making at his full-time job, put it to work. And I think I would have put it to work more carefully. So how do you do that? Because I'm like a very tactical person. So if someone gives me advice, I'm like, yeah, that's nice. How do I do that? Like the first thing I would do is look up a P&L and just build a financial model or build from a financial model so that you understand your cost structure of the product. And maybe you have the beginnings of understanding the other components of cost and of profit that are going to be the mechanics that make the business work and be viable over time. I mean, you can spend some money and get some product and like wing it for a second, but do you want to have employees? Do you want to take care of them? Do you want to grow this thing to, an 8-figure business? If yes, then become financially literate. And I think the first place to do that is just with like a nice little spreadsheet that you get kind of comfortable with and put your numbers into and plug around.
I think that's so important. I share that sentiment. Even as a business owner myself, I also fell into those trappings of, really focusing on being so passionate about bringing value to people, making impactful, decisions and conversations. And I look back now, certainly, and, I should have probably built things, differently. Now I think we're both lucky to have success stories that we can look back and have that piece of advice for ourselves in the past. But as we look at founders that are looking to get into business, I think it's really great to see that you're sharing that level of advice because I think it's important. It leads me to one question that I'm curious about as well from your perspective. I've worked with a bunch of startups, a bunch of brands that are, direct to consumer, up and coming founders trying to figure out how they build their team around them. Oftentimes building teams around you look around, there's friends and family that's within an arm's length away. And of course, we all naturally want to support our friends and family and find people that are willing to do that. So, knowing that you're someone who built a business with your family, I'm someone who built a business with my family. My curiosity is, I won't ask the loaded question of would you build a business with your friends and family again? Rather, I'll ask you the question of what are
You're
your
gonna watch
thoughts
this.
around, yeah, exactly. What are your thoughts around the teams that you build around you at the beginning, and what you should prioritize when it comes to what you're trying to do that way?
Yeah, I think so. Let me answer this question in a kind of new and interesting way because, as you're saying, you and I have we've made a choice. And
Yeah.
I think I think we both like the choice that we made to build with friends and family. Um, but that sort of talks about the starting place of it. And I can talk about the starting place. But I encourage people to think about it this way. Like, do you want your team to operate like good friends, to have each other's back in the way that a family would? And if the answer to that is yes, which by the way, it really, really should be, because
Yeah.
family and friends have your back, then whether or not you're hiring friends and family, as Ash and I did, build a team that operates that way, right? Like
Yeah.
there's all sorts of disadvantageous things about it. It's hard if the person doesn't perform. It's like, well, this is awkward. I'm firing my husband. I'm firing my best friend. I'm firing my cousin. But so there's lots of reasons why it's a terrible idea. But whether or not you're literally hiring your actual friends and actual family, which Ash and I both think is actually a good idea, if you can create a team that treats each other that way, like that's a win. And I think that part is pretty uncontroversial. I think
Yeah.
everybody can agree that having a team that treats each other and enjoys being with each other the way that family and friends typically do, or at least healthy family and friend relationships do, then you really have something there. And to put it back in a business context, like that's leverage. You've got someone who's committed to another person. That's
Yeah.
leverage on their time and on their productivity, and they're going to be there for each other, and they're going to work harder as a result. So wherever you start, if you can find a way to create that within your culture, you're here to help. You're here to help your family. Then I think that there's a success story there. So
Well
um,
said.
I cannot imagine a better and more delightful note to end this on. It's been super cool to chat with you. I hope we do it again. I hope my broken leg heals, but not before we can have lots more cool and fun conversations with friends about business. Thank you.
For sure. Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Thanks.